Good day. I'm Addison Pollock, Director of Community Engagement with AARP Indiana. As some of you may know, May is Bike Month, and AARP Indiana is celebrating with two exciting virtual events to best help you experience your community on two wheels. Thank you for those who are joining us today live for the bicycle-friendly driver training in collaboration with Fort Wayne Trails and Bicycle Indiana. This program highlights the rules of the road that keep both bicyclists and drivers of all ages safe while getting around their community and getting where they need to go. You can catch our next virtual Bike Month event, which is called Basics with Freewheelin', on Thursday, May 20th at 12 p.m. Eastern Time. You can tune in to learn bike repair essentials with Freewheelin' Bikes based in Indianapolis. I encourage everyone who is watching today live to ask questions in the comment section on Facebook, and we'll make sure to answer those at the end of the program. I am pleased to welcome our special guest, Angie Quinn. Angie is the Development Director with Fort Wayne Trails Incorporated. She also serves as the treasurer on the board of Bicycle Indiana, and she is a league cycling instructor through the League of American Bicyclists. So Angie is a lifelong resident of Fort Wayne, and she began bicycling again at age 50 and now commutes to work by bike several days a week. So we're very excited to have Angie with us, and it's my pleasure to turn it over to her. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Addison. Good morning, everyone. Thanks so much for visiting us today and learning a little bit about how to be a bicycle-friendly driver. I would love to know, and if you can post this as a comment on Facebook, would love to know how many of you are bike riders. So if you could do that, that would be great. But I'm going to go ahead and just get into my my program. League of American Bicyclists created this presentation. It's based on something that the city of Fort Collins, Colorado actually put together. And it's been adopted for national use. We've been giving this presentation up in Fort Wayne for 3 years, and Bicycle Indiana now has given it 2 or 3 times as well. So if you are interested in this for a group in your community, just reach out to me. You'll see my email at the end of the program. So we're going to go ahead and get started. Hopefully, yep, here we go. All right, so today we're going to cover sharing the road. A little bit about infrastructure, some common crash causes. We're going to learn about why bicyclists take the lane and what that means. We're going to talk a little bit about some things that may be legal, may not be legal for both drivers and bicyclists. And then I'm going to cover what we teach cyclists to make sure that they are safe when they're using the road. And there's 2 things on the end of this list called questions and exam, and I'll get to that in a little while, but don't worry, there's no test, I promise. So how many of you drive a car? How many of you are pedestrians? How many of you ride a bike or ride the bus or rollerblade? We are all people. Whether we are driving a vehicle or whether we are riding a bike or whether we are walking on a sidewalk, we are all people first. Let's talk about sharing the road. So what we tell bicyclists is that they fare best when they act and are treated as drivers of vehicles. Legally, a bicycle is a vehicle, and bicyclists are required by law in all 50 states to follow all rules of the road. So oftentimes people I know who ride their bikes will actually call it driving their bikes, because you really do have to be in traffic just as a motorist is. There's some special infrastructure though for people who are riding bikes. And I'm going to go from left to right on these. The first one is called a bike box, and it's a special lane, and basically bike lane, that is at an intersection. And because sometimes it's really hard for traffic to see that there are bicyclists in the line of traffic, they create a space where if a bicyclist takes the bike lane all the way up to the traffic light, there's a space where they can get in front of the first vehicle And it's a different color. It's highly marked that it's for bicyclists only. And then they get to go through the intersection first so that no one misses seeing them. We have one up here in Fort Wayne. I don't know how many there are in other parts of Indiana. The second one is called a toucan crossing, and that's basically where there's some painted information that says that you can go in more than one direction, so like two directions. And then the one you probably most commonly see is this one that's called a sharrow, with the bike I hope you can see my cursor as I'm circling that. There's a picture of a bike and then two arrows that shows you the direction of traffic a bicycle rider can go in. And that basically reminds folks that it's an area where bicycle riders are commonly seen. So it might be a marked bike route. It might be an area that is a detour for a bike lane or a bike trail. And just basically to let you know. And then also generally they are painted where the bicycle rider should be. So if it's in the middle of the lane, what it's telling a bicycle rider is that this is a narrow lane, you should be in the middle, all right? And then occasionally there are actually traffic signals that have a bike signal. I've never seen one of these. I know they exist. I have no idea if there's any of those in Indiana. We talked a little bit about the directional paint. Bike lanes are common. Protected bike lanes are where there's actually an area that's drawn between where the car traffic is supposed to be and the bike traffic is supposed to be, to kind of create a 3-foot area that separates them. And then there's oftentimes some special information about how to go through a roundabout. I know even as a driver of a vehicle that is sometimes not as simple as it looks. So some of the markings are specifically for bike riders who are in those roundabouts as well. A few other ones real quick. Sometimes if there's a special way someone in a bike lane needs to go, that might be pointed out. In this one on the left, it's actually where to get access to a trail, they're telling you to make your left turn before you get up to the intersection if it is safe to cross, which is unusual. So that's why it's marked especially. Sometimes like the cultural trail in Indianapolis, there's a shared use pathway, and there may be information about where pedestrians should be and where bicycle riders should be. There are even some areas where there are bike lanes that are called contraflow. So either a bike rider is supposed to ride against traffic, which is not the typical, or the bike lane allows two-way traffic. And we don't have any of those up here in Fort Wayne, but I know there are some in other parts of the state. So let's talk about some crash data. What causes crashes between people riding bikes and people driving cars? 4% of all traffic accidents are between a bicycle rider and a driver of a car. 23% of those are serious crashes. 89% happen at intersections and sidewalks or driveways, excuse me. 26% involve wrong way riding, and that's either the bicycle rider is riding the wrong way. Very seldom is it the driver riding the wrong way. So it's usually a bicycle rider who doesn't know that they're supposed to basically follow traffic and be in traffic the same as a car would. Up here in Allen County, 52% of bicycle and motorist crashes were due to motorist errors, which means that almost half of them were the bicycle rider's fault. So one of the things we do as league cycling instructors is work really hard to teach people the best way to ride a bike. And then nationally, 50% of bicyclists and motorist crashes are due to motorist error. So it's 50-50. So in almost every crash, both road users could have done something differently. So what we're going to talk about now are some things to do to be as safe as possible for everyone. So quick question, we talked about bike lanes, and this is a person in a bike lane that's going against traffic. My guess is it's not legal because we can't see any painting on the bike lane that indicates to us that it's what's called a contraflow lane. So that is not legal to go the wrong way on a bike lane. 50% of crashes happen with a bicyclist riding against traffic. And oftentimes, if they're in the wrong lane and you're at a traffic stop and you're driving and you're planning to turn right, you're not looking to see if there's any cars coming from that lane because the car should be, going the opposite direction. And so a bicyclist is doing that is putting themselves in danger. So what you should do as the bicycle driver is make sure you always look right at driveways and intersections, or left. If it's a one-way street, I know in downtown Fort Wayne, we have lots of one-way streets, and the most common intersections for pedestrian and car crashes are those one-way downtown intersections, because people in cars are looking in the direction that traffic is flowing to see when it's free for them to pass, but they're not looking at the sidewalks, which are legal for people to be walking on the opposite direction. And by making sure you look both ways, all right? Don't just assume because it's a one-way street or because traffic is flowing in a certain direction. Look both ways. It makes everybody safer. So here's a situation that actually happened in Fort Collins where a car was driving in a parking lot, and there was a lane to get in and out of the parking lot, and the bicycle rider was riding the wrong way in that in that parking lot. You would think that that's not a real busy space and it's not a big deal, but it is. So even in those sorts of locations, a bicycle rider should always be going in the correct direction for the lane that they're in. In this case, the person driving the car didn't look right because they were not anticipating traffic to be coming from that direction. Bicycle rider ran right into them, and the bicyclist was ejected and slammed into the windshield. So what could have been done differently is that the bicyclist could have remembered to ride with the flow of traffic. The motorist could have looked both ways and definitely right, even though there wouldn't be traffic coming from that way, or at least vehicle traffic. And so that's the kind of thing that we'll talk about for the rest of this. Some just easy ways to avoid these kinds of crashes. Here's a second question about being legal or not. And I know all of you have seen this. So usually you see a bike rider, if they're in the road and they're riding along, they tend to be over on the right side for the most part, and they're following, the right direction. Every once in a while, you'll see two people riding their bikes, and they might even be taking up the whole lane, right? You can't get past them. That's actually legal. So in the state of Indiana, you may ride two abreast, and you can do that for a lot of reasons. Bicycle riders in groups tend to do it because it makes the group smaller and they're not impeding traffic as much. If you are just with one other person and it's not safe to pass, there's not enough room. By taking the whole lane, you're giving the message that it's not safe to pass. And that even happens for a person who's riding a bike by themselves. We encourage them, if it's not safe to pass, that they should ride in the middle of the lane or as close to it as possible, so that it's a clear indication that it would be dangerous to try to pass the person on the bicycle at that point. It's a little different than when we encounter farm machinery on roads. Oftentimes, the very slow-moving farm machinery will move over as close, out of the traffic lane if they need to, so that you can safely pass on the left. With bicycles, we actually suggest that they maintain where they're at and go to the middle of the lane. because it's safer than a driver thinking they might get past a slower moving bike rider on the right if there's not enough space. So bicyclists take the lane because it's often the safest space, because in some communities in Indiana, it's illegal to ride your bike or on the sidewalk. And then on top of that, it's also a lot of times it's unsafe because there's lots of driveways on crossing sidewalks. Bicycles take the lane to prevent being buzzed or sideswiped. Again, if it's too narrow. Take the lane in order to trigger a traffic light. I can't tell you as a bike rider how many times I have sat at a traffic light waiting patiently for it to turn, and it simply doesn't because I'm not positioned in the right space for that to happen. And then also we take the lane when we want to turn left. And if you're turning right, you can stay over kind of on the right side of the road. But if you want to make a left-hand turn, or if you're on a one-way street and you're going to have to get into the left lane in order to make the turn, that's why bike riders will take the lane. Okay, here's another legal or not. In this case, one bike rider is riding on the shoulder of the road and the other one is on the road. So this one is actually legal. Let's go back to that real quick. It looks like the person on the left is actually pulled into the traffic lane to avoid all of the gravel that is on the right-hand side. The person in front, for whatever reasons, decided they want to ride through the gravel. But oftentimes, bike riders will change positions because there's some obstacle in the road that might not affect a car driver, but it will definitely affect a rider of a bicycle, like gravel in the road. So if there's debris, if the lane is narrow, or to be more visible, and finally, to avoid the door zone. So let's talk about another scenario, then we'll move to the door zone. In this scenario, there's a bike that's going across an overpass. They are perfectly legal riding on that road. It's not an interstate. And it's kind of narrow because it's one of those bridges. And there's a truck coming up behind it, and it determines that there's enough space to pass the bike and begins to do so. And unfortunately, a car then starts coming from the opposite direction. The driver of the truck realizes there's not enough space, pulls back in, but forgets about the bike rider and actually hits him. So the bike rider should have gone to the middle of the road, just at the middle of that lane, to clearly indicate, hey, you might not see it, but I can see there's traffic ahead. It is not safe to pass me. It's a narrow road. It's not safe to pass me. So we ask bike riders to do that. And then, so the cyclist could have taken the lane, and the motorist should have waited for a safe, legal place to pass. And by a legal place to pass, we'll get into dotted lines and straight lines in just a few minutes. Moving back to the door zones really quick. It's never okay for bike riders to kind of weave in and out of traffic. I know as little kids, I remember doing this. It's like, oh, I want to be as close to the curb as possible, but oh, there's a car and I have to come out and then, go back through again. That's not safe. Bicycle riders should be predictable. So if you can maintain your space on the street as much as possible without going too far left or too far right, then the drivers of the vehicles can see what your intent is. And so that's safer for everyone. However, there's these door zones, and what do you do about them? A lot of times the bike lanes, if there are bike lanes, are drawn right up next to where the cars are parking. It's like that in downtown Fort Wayne. I think it's like that in some parts of Indy. Sure, it's like that in other communities as well. It's not safe because that's actually a really, really common crash, is to have someone open a car door as someone is riding their bike in a bike lane, and the bicycle rider will hit the car and flip over. It hurts a lot. The thing to do is it's this cool thing. It's called the Dutch reach. And honestly, I have trouble with this, but then again, I'm an AARP member. So if to be safe as possible, when you park your car, before you open the door, use your right hand to do the opening. So you're actually like looking over your shoulder to open the door. So I know it's weird to think about opening reaching for the door latch and opening it that way. But by doing that, you really do force yourself to take one last look. And if there's a bicycle rider coming, you'll see them. Sometimes people call that the Dutch reach. Okay, another common crash is the approach turn, or what's called the left cross. And almost half of these result in serious injury. And it's a lot about being visible. So if you are the bike rider and you are in traffic and you are way over on the right, and you think it's okay for you to go ahead and just keep going forward, and then the light changes and here you come, and the cars are moving and you're maybe even catching up and maybe even passing them, the vehicles that want to turn left on the other side of the road, they can't see you. And so if you are doing that, then it unfortunately happens more often than it needs to, is that someone turning left will hit a bike rider because they couldn't see them, because they were coming up basically in the shadow of the traffic lane. So if there's oncoming traffic, slow down, stop and wait. I have to confess, I have oftentimes gotten to a traffic light when it's very close to turning red, and I really want to make that turn while I still have time, and maybe I do it too fast and don't really look carefully before I do. But that oftentimes, especially if you're a bike rider and you've been in traffic and you're trying to keep up with traffic, you might be the very last thing coming across that intersection before the light changes. So slow down as a car driver, stop, wait to turn, make sure there's no bicyclists still coming. If you're watching a bicyclist approaching, it's kind of hard to determine their speed. I'm a 10-mile-an-hour bike rider in town, but I have friends who are like 25-mile-an-hour when they need to, bike riders in town. And so if you're just seeing the bike approaching, you can't really tell which bike rider that is. So wait and make sure that you can actually determine that it's safe before you do make the turn. And then finally, watch out, like I said, for the shadow riders, because if there's a line of traffic and that bicyclist is coming up next to the line, you aren't going to see them until they're in the intersection. So just be very cognizant of that. We also tell bike riders not to do that. That's a good time for them to actually take the lane. So if you know that's going to be a big, busy intersection and you're a bike rider, it's actually safer for you to go ahead and get into the line of traffic. Just be cognizant of the fact that because you're smaller, if there's cars that are waiting to turn, they might not see you. So you need to make sure that you've made eye contact, that they have clearly seen that you're crossing this before you cross. All right, this is interesting. This is that double line I was telling you about. So there's people riding on the shoulder. It might be a bike lane. It looks like it's a shoulder, and they're driving slow. So the faster moving traffic wants to pass them, and they have crossed the double yellow line to do that. In Indiana, it's legal to do that. So you have permission, as long as it's safe, to go ahead and pass a slower moving bicycle rider on the road, even when there's a double line. So make sure you allow 3 feet, as long as it's clear. If there's oncoming traffic, you have to slow down and you have to wait to pass. You cannot just squeeze in. That is not allowed. It's illegal. And then please do not return to your lane until you can clearly see that the bicycle rider is in your mirror, all right? If you can't see them, it's not safe to pull back into the lane yet. Kind of like when you're on the interstate, you always check to make sure that you can see those cars in your rearview mirror before you back into the passing or the main lane. All right. So in Indiana, as of 2019, all Indiana drivers must keep at least 3 feet distance from bicyclists. Almost every state has this law. Some states have actually increased the distance to 4 feet. And if there's not room, you are required by law to yield to the slower traffic until it's safe to pass. There's no 2.5 feet. There's no, oh yeah, sure, there's still plenty of space. Just please always give 3 feet if you can. Another kind of crash is what's called an overtaking turn or a right hook. In this instance, both the bicycle rider and the driver of the car are going in the same lane, and that's allowed. And the bicycle rider could be going any speed whatsoever. And this could even be while they're both stopped at traffic. But the driver of the car wants to turn right. And occasionally they think they can do that faster than the bicycle rider can get into the intersection. And they'll attempt to pass in front of them, and that oftentimes results in a crash. So bicycle riders, we should take the lane if we're at the front of traffic at an intersection where there's a traffic light. If we take the lane, then there's really no question about who gets to go first. If you're driving, before you make your right turn, make sure you look in that right rear view mirror just to make sure there's not any bicycle riders coming up next to you. And this is something I did not know. This is officially the way you're supposed to do it. If you're going to turn right and there's a bike lane and it's clear, you should actually move your car into the bike lane because that's the rightmost lane of traffic before you make your right turn. It also makes it really clear to anyone who's approaching on a bicycle that there's a car ahead of them that is going to be making that right cross at some point at that intersection. So that way a bicycle rider can gauge, that they don't have time to do that and they need to slow down. So avoid, if you see the bicycle rider moving and you're coming up behind them, don't think that you're going to get up past them and make the turn. You don't know what that bicycle rider might say, oh no, the light's about ready to turn. I'm going to speed up just as you decide you want to make your right turn. So just be cognizant of that riders are trying to cross the road as well. Okay. Ooh, this is a good question. Legal or not? The bicycle riders are riding right on the lane of traffic. There's gravel. The vehicle is riding in the middle of the lane. And is it legal or not? So if the driver was already there and the bicycles are attempting to get out of the gravel, they may have chosen to get closer to that car if they are moving quickly enough. So it could have been legal. However, if the vehicle is just driving and is not giving them 3 feet, then it's not legal. So this is kind of ambiguous. So you really do need to pay attention to like all the different signals as people are riding their bikes and as people are driving their cars, just to be aware of what's going on the road. So some basics about passing a bicyclist. Always check for bicyclists in your blind spots. They're smaller. It's hard. It's sometimes hard to see them. They can be missed. If you're driving a bigger vehicle, make sure that you're giving more than 3 feet if you have mirrors or extended wheel wells. So those have to be 3 feet from the rider. It's not just, the window. It's got to be whatever the outermost part of your car is. And then remember that any large profile vehicle, no matter whether it's a calm day or a windy day, if you've got a bigger vehicle, it can create a wind blast, which can cause a bike rider to really have trouble keeping control of their bike. That also happens in big urban areas where there's sort of like wind tunnel effects with the tall buildings. And bike riders sometimes will have to deal with wind that might not be visible for the people who are driving their vehicles. I've never encountered this. I think this only happens when there's a bike race of some kind going on and the road hasn't been closed. I would be interested to know if there's anybody in this group who's watching today who has actually ever encountered this. So a peloton is when you've got a large group of bike riders. They're taking up an entire lane of traffic. Sometimes they're even taking up an entire road. Think Tour de France. And they're riding very close together in part because that makes them all faster. What they're doing is the people in front are kind of catching the wind so the people in back can ride faster because of that. There's some interesting like physics involved that I don't get because I'm not that kind of a rider. But if you ever encounter this and you need to pass, tap your horn just so that the group can hear that there's someone behind, and then they'll make moves that need to happen so that you can pass. And you have to still allow that 3 feet. So don't pass until it's clear. And the people at the front of that group, they'll know when it's clear. So they aren't going to get over to the side until they know that it's safe for you to pass if you've signaled that you want to pass them from behind by honking the horn once. Some other things to be aware of. This happens to me both as someone who drives my car and both as someone who rides my bike. It's really hard to see sometimes when there's a lot of sun glare or fog. Different times of the year, there are streets in your communities that like the sun just lines up perfectly. So you're trying to see if the light has changed and all you can see is that sun blasting in your window. Be especially mindful of the fact that there could be bicycle riders ahead of you. There could be pedestrians ahead of you. There could be cars that have stopped or are going very slow in front of you. It's really hard to see when there's a lot of sun glare or fog. Be aware if you see children on bikes. A lot of times they haven't learned all the rules yet. They should have learned the rules. Their parents are responsible for them learning the rules. But children are unpredictable, so just slow down. Hopefully they'll do what they need to do. But if you have slowed down and you are watching what they are doing, you will be better ready to react if they do something wrong. Try not to speed. Bicycle riders also have to be able to judge the speed of vehicles that are approaching. And if you're speeding, you might get there before they realize that you could have, if they were trying to cross the road or something like that. And then finally, illegal courtesy. And I know we've all done this. Here in Fort Wayne, we have an issue where our bike trails cross roads. And in Allen County, we prefer that people, and there's a stop sign at every trail crossing at an intersection. So a trail user has to stop before they proceed. In Indiana, you are supposed to slow down if there's somebody crossing at a marked crossing and yield to them. But there's this weird space in between where someone may see that there's traffic approaching, still plenty of time to cross, so they'll cross, you have to slow down. Or you see that there's someone on the trail approaching the intersection, and out of the goodness of your heart, you stop so they can cross. That's illegal courtesy. Because what might happen is the person who's crossing the sidewalk or the trail, they may see that you've stopped and think it's safe to go. but there may be traffic coming from the other direction that isn't stopping. There may be a vehicle behind the stopped car that doesn't realize that they've stopped. So there's all sorts of other potential danger with being nice sometimes. So if there's not someone crossing an intersection, pedestrian or a driver, if they're not actively crossing, you actually don't stop. I don't know if this is a bigger problem in Allen County than other places, but maybe that's something we can talk about when we get to the end. So the basics of what we teach bicyclists: drive your bike, take the lane when it's appropriate, control the situation around you. So if you're worried about getting kind of pushed into a corner where there's not enough room for someone to pass you, then it's your job, when it's safe, to get out and take a spot in that flow of traffic. Even if you're slower than them, it's okay. There's no minimum speeds on most local roads in Indiana. Ride on the right side. The sweet spot for a bicycle rider is actually in the tire track of the right tire track of where the vehicles ride in the road, because then you're far enough away from the gutter so that you're not getting all the gravel and stuff like that. You're visible enough, but you're still not in the middle of the lane if there's space for cars to pass you. So at all intersections, like four-way stops, or even a stop or a yield on one lane and the other one doesn't, bicycle riders are required to stop at those. And then remember to follow the first come, first served. So if the bicycle rider arrived at that intersection before you, they get to go. They're the vehicle that got there first. They get to go first. Bicycle riders need to yield when they're changing lanes. You can't just go and expect that the cars behind you are just going to suddenly stop. So you can do that. And always make sure you're riding the right direction, and choose your intersection positioning correctly. So if you want to turn left, you should be working your way to the leftmost lane so that it's obvious that you are turning left. Don't try to make a left turn from a right lane if there's multiple lanes. And make sure that you are visible. And then we don't have turn signals on our bikes. So what we want people to do who are riding bikes is to remember to use hand signals. They're required by law. In Indiana, to turn left, you turn your hand left. To turn right, you're supposed to put your hand up at a right angle. To stop, you put it down. And nobody knows what that right angle thing is. So it's also okay if you just point with your right hand. Sometimes that's easier. So you'll see both. But make sure that you are always signaling. I actually have made it a habit to signal even if there's nobody there, just so I'm always remembering to do it. So takeaways from the presentation today: remember to treat bicycle riders as drivers of vehicles. Both kinds of road users can take action to avoid crashes. Pay special attention at intersections and driveways. Understand why a bicycle rider will take the lane. Always remember the 3-foot rule when passing. And remember that everybody using the road, when it comes down to it, everyone is people. So it's not just, oh, that car, it's that person driving that car. Oh, that bicycle. No, it's a person riding that bicycle. Oh, that motorcycle. No, it's a person riding the motorcycle. Share the road keeps people safe, and we're all people. So I'm open for questions.
Okay. Angie, thank you so much. I want to give you a virtual round of applause, and I encourage everyone to do the same. That was a really impressive presentation with a lot of practical tips. I know we've gotten some love in the comment section. People saying that they had rode their bike to work, and that others have had this is like their third time taking this training. So thanks again for presenting. We do have a question that just popped up, and we can throw that back up, about visibility. So I wish you would say more about the importance of high visibility apparel for cyclists. I'd love to get your comments on that, and also about red flashers on the rear of the bike and lights at night.
Yeah, so in the state of Indiana, if you are riding your bike from 30 minutes before dusk to 30 minutes after dawn, you have to have a red reflecting or flashing thing on the back of your bike that can be seen from 500 feet. And you have to have a light on the front. So that also can be seen from that distance. So that's actually the state law. In terms of practicality, you should have a flashing light on the back of your bike that's easy to be seen. It's so people can see you. If you're riding during those times, yeah, you should definitely be wearing something that is high vis, if at all possible. There's tape that you can add that's reflective. You can add that to your bike helmet. Oh yeah, by the way, always wear a bike helmet. That's a first must have. Not a state law, but it would be silly not to. So if you know someone who doesn't ride with a helmet, please ask them to wear a helmet. But the high vis is important. I'm not going to say it's essential though. If your bicycle is visible and your helmet is visible, the clothing that you're wearing, depending on the circumstances, doesn't have to be. Right now, I'm wearing a white jean jacket. I've got on khaki slacks. I'm going to get on my bike when I'm done. I'm going to put my bike helmet on. I'm going to put my flashing light on, even though it's day. I do it during the day, and I'm going to ride to the office. I actually stayed home this morning to do this from the comfort of my home, but I'm going to the office this afternoon. So there are absolutely times to be in high vis, but lots of different kinds of people ride bicycles, not just people who have all of the serious biking gear. So those reflectors, those lights, and something reflective, whether it's on your bike or on you, is a really important thing.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Yeah, and speaking as someone who's been by a car on a bike before, wearing a helmet is a very smart thing to do. So I'll echo that. I know that we do have another question about scooters. You can throw that up. All right, scooters are becoming popular. Do rules for bikes apply to scooters, especially the motorized ones?
I think in Indiana, the bike law that passed recently about e-bikes included some language about scooters. But I think a lot of that is dependent on individual communities. So I don't know that I could speak to statewide. I know that in Fort Wayne, scooters are not allowed on the roads. At least they're not supposed to be. They're supposed to be used on the sidewalks. They can't be left in the middle of the sidewalk when you park it, because we have dockless up here. And you are still required to yield to slower traffic. So if you're on a sidewalk, that's most likely going to be a pedestrian. So the rules are a little different. I think overall, though, everyone should yield to a slower moving traffic that's in front of you, whether you're on a sidewalk, a trail, a road. And nobody should be stupid about using their scooters. So when you're done with it, don't leave it knocked over in the middle of the road so no one can get past. You still have to obey all the traffic rules that pedestrians have to obey. And again, if your community allows scooters on the road, I'm going to guess that they're going to be treating that in a way like a vehicle. I can't really speak to that.
Yeah, thanks for that. Those are some really good principles, just some common sense ones. I know in Indianapolis, I believe you're not allowed to ride on the sidewalk or the cultural trail. From what I remember, I don't know if those laws have changed. So, but per what Angie said, check with your local officials. Just check like a quick Google search to see what the actual the law is regarding scooters.
Yeah, this is
Yeah, go ahead.
just as an aside, there's actually a community up here in Northeast Indiana that I shall not name, that actually, I don't know that they officially have this as like a town ordinance, but there's actually signs up at the town borders saying that bicycles are not allowed on the road.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So there's, I don't know the legality of that, but it just kind of illustrates that the laws within communities can be very, very specific. And so, yeah, the cultural trail is a no bike zone, I think, for the most part. But sidewalks outside of the downtown area, you can ride your bike, because where would kids ride otherwise? You know, so I mean, there's all sorts of variations on rules. Downtown Fort Wayne actually doesn't have any rules about bicycles on sidewalks. So.
Oh, okay, great. Yeah, I think I believe I heard from IndyCog a while back. In Indy, you have to be 12 years old or younger to ride on the sidewalk legally. So I don't know. As we were saying, things change community by community, so it's always best to check. I'm going to check in with our producer. Do we have any other questions? And if not, we can, all right. Doesn't look like we have any further questions, but I do, again, want to just thank Angie for taking the time to present to our audience today, and for our future viewers to continue to reach out if you have questions. If you'd like more information on today's content, you can contact Angie with any questions. We can throw her email up on the screen so you can write that down. And then also, for those who are interested, there's something really cool that will come out of this presentation. You can take a quiz and earn a certificate of completion for this particular training. So if you're interested in that as well, contact Angie, and she will provide all the information you need to take that quiz. For those who are viewing this and interested in volunteering with AARP Indiana, we're always looking to build up our volunteer teams in communities across the state. You can reach out to our general email address right there. Just let us know if you're interested, and we can take care of that. If you enjoyed today's program, you can check out our next Bike Month event. Like I said at the top of the hour, it's called Basics with Freewheelin', which is a bike shop in Indianapolis. So they're going to talk about all the bike repair 101 basics. That is next Thursday, May 20th at 12 p.m. Eastern Time. So thanks for tuning in, everyone, and have a great day. Happy cycling.